Hello everybody, welcome back to Forza Horizon 5 with a revisited challenge. It's been quite a few months since I first did this. This was actually the second video I ever did on Horizon 5, and that was a downhill speedrun using the philosophy of soapboxing. You hold in the clutch, and you find a hill, and you see how fast you can go down without the use of your engine. And well, it was an interesting experience because there's not really a philosophy for building your car other than maximum weight to give you the maximum gravitational effect, essentially, and as little aero as possible with off-road tires and rally suspension. That's pretty much it. There's no real secret for tuning as far as I can tell, so it's just whatever car works best. And in, the few weeks of Horizon 5 that I was using, I think actually the game hadn't fully come out yet for everybody who didn't have the Ultimate Edition when I think about it. So, with my limited selection of vehicles, I found out that the Jaguar XJ220 was the best. That hit over 190 miles an hour going downhill without the engine. That's no small feat. But it's been a few months. I've gotten a lot more cars. Let's see if anything can go faster. Now this was a car that I was really curious to try out as soon as I unlocked it, the Maserati Hctf Indy car. Now the auto union that I ran last time did horribly, and I think that's because of the very lightweight nature of this. Even with all-wheel drive and maximum tires and the whole 9 yards, it weighs south of 2,000 pounds. So it's automatically at a disadvantage on that regard. However, I thought, very aerodynamic, and, as we found out from the Baja builds, very capable off-road. And no, there's a reason it's first. It's because it's not very fast. I mean, granted, 162 miles an hour without the use of your engine is no small feat, but you can see it just does not pick up speed very quickly relative to vehicles that we'll see later on. It just doesn't have the weight to pull it down the hill, basically. 162, it just flashes over, and then it doesn't have the speed for the landing. It's not bad on the landing, because you can sometimes get occasionally more speed on the landing, but yeah, the Maserati is just simply too light. Now, I wanted something heavy, but aerodynamic. This is one of the last vehicles that I built, and if you want something that's fast, i.e. aerodynamic, with a vast amount of weight, you go to Bugatti. And the Chiron weighs over 2 tons. But it can also hit nearly 300 miles an hour in this guy. It's not even the Streamline kit. I wish we had the Streamline kit, because that would be insanely good in this, I would imagine. But the Chiron really disappointed me. I had high hopes for this vehicle, I really did. Like I said, 2 tons plus, pretty aerodynamic for what it is, and it wasn't quick. I don't know why. I really don't. Again, it just didn't pick up speed. It is very difficult to explain what makes cars fast and what doesn't. I'm working off assumptions based on real-world physics, and Forza is probably a little different than that. So, I really am not 100% sure, but only 164, quite a disappointing showing from the massive Bugatti. Now, this one is a strange one. This is an oddball. Yes, the Mercedes Unimog has the aerodynamics of the mountain we're going down. In fact, it might actually be worse, to be honest. But it's 10 times the weight of the Maserati. Over 17,000 pounds. And I thought, well, if we're trying to get maximum gravitational effect, being 17,000 pounds pulling you down the mountain might mean something despite the sheer lack of aerodynamics. And well, it was certainly heavy, that part was correct, but quick it was not. It was not quick at all. I should emphasize that this is a very close challenge. All these vehicles be very close together in terms of speed, just by the nature of it. And yeah, the Unimog struggled. It just doesn't have the aerodynamics. It also doesn't have the visibility. I got really a little confused. I ran a bit wide, and I wasn't really sure if I got the absolute best run. Plus, I was a little surprised to see it be just so horrifically slow. 165, 164. just not quick. So I was curious if interior camera view would help me out, and nope. It was just as bad, just as terrible as the exterior camera view. 165 was all of the Unimog combustor, which I can't say was all that surprising given the aerodynamics, but still, 17,500 pounds, I was expecting a little better. Speaking of expecting a little better, the Nissan R390 was a vehicle that I selected because it's very similar to the XJ220. They both competed at Le Mans in the GT1 class. They're both incredibly aerodynamic and incredibly fast, and they're pretty similar in weight, so this should have been fantastic. And yet, again, since this challenge loves to throw up strange and weird successes and failures, this is the latter. It's a massive failure. It is faster than the Unimog. Cool. It was the first vehicle of the session to break the 170-mile-an-hour barrier, which is a decent showing, I guess, considering the lack of engine. But yeah, 173 is all that it could muster. It's almost 20 miles an hour down on what the XJ220 got last time, and yeah, just underwhelming for reasons that, once again, I have no idea why. Now, this was a bit of an oddity, I'm gonna be honest. I just sort of threw this in there because why not? It actually had a very high speed rating. It was like 8.9 or something like that. And I thought, you know what? I haven't used the mods very much. Why not give it a go? It's a very modern car. It's pretty aerodynamic, given that it's a speedster. I'm not sure the roll bar really helps with that, but I don't think Forza actually measures aerodynamics in that regard, in regards to the roll bars and whatnot. And, yeah, it was close to the R390, and that's not necessarily a good thing. We moved the goalpost up by 2 miles an hour to 175, which we're getting up there in speed. We really are. That's not too bad. That's actually very impressive, even by today's standards, for, really reminds you, 0 horsepower use, just holding in the clutch. But the Monza, still just barely faster than a 30-plus-year-old Datsun. Huh. Now think of this like a less extreme Unimog, where it's heavy but not 17,000 pounds, it's boxy but not quite a brick. The Aston Martin DBX. I wanted to try an SUV, a proper one, and this seemed pretty aerodynamic and it seemed pretty new, so I wanted to give it a bit of a shot. And on paper it should be good, but we're not on paper, we're on the side of a mountain, and we're trying to see how fast it can go downhill. And it was close. It was close to 180 miles an hour, but it just couldn't quite reach it. So, it was relatively, I think it was just too average. That's the biggest problem for the DBX, like the actual DBX in real life, ironically enough. Too average. It doesn't have the aerodynamics of vehicles that we'll see later on, and it doesn't have the weight of vehicles that we will ironically see later on as well, but also they've seen in the past, so it's just sort of stuck in a gray zone. It's good. 178 is no slouch, and if it was for that jump, it definitely would have been faster, and it could handle the jump very well, still carrying 171 on the landing, but that's still not 180. That's still not 200. Now, it was around this time with the Toyota 2000 GT that I realized the true benefit of weight, because this was one of the last vehicles that I built. We still have 1 or 2 more coming up, but this was one of the last vehicles that I built that was meant to be light as a side effect, with a more focus on aerodynamics. At least in theory. This does not have body kit modifications, which is incredibly important, as you will see as we get to the top 5. But, you know, it looks pretty aerodynamic. It was a very aerodynamic car for the time. And Forza doesn't care. Yeah, it doesn't care one little bit. And that means it is 1 mile an hour further up the road from the DBX, 179 miles per hour for the 2000 GT, which means, yes, it is faster than, you know, the car with its engine running, but not fast enough for the rest of the field, not fast enough to beat the Jaguar, which is disappointing because I love this car, but what can you do? And in fact, the 2000 GT tied with a car that I expected to do a lot better. The Lamborghini Aventador, it's heavy, relative speaking. It's all-wheel drive from the factory, got massive off-road racing tires, and for the first time so far, it has body kit modifications in the form of the Duke's Dynamics kit. So it's got those little fins, which doesn't seem like a lot, but it reduces drag and increases the top speed just by adding those little parts. And that's the most important thing on this hill climb, or this descent, I should say, not hill climb, on this descent, because we're trying to go as fast as possible without any horsepower. So it's all about aerodynamics and weight, and this has a decent amount of weight and a decent amount of aero, and yet it's exactly the same speed as a Toyota from 1969. Admittedly, the run was not the best, but I did try it again, and this is actually the second run that you see here. But yeah, just not great. 179, we still can't crack that 180 mile an hour barrier. The 180 mile an hour barrier would not be broken until another hypercar, the Mclaren Speedtail. This is about as extreme as you can get on the road for streamlining right now, apart from that Mercedes EQXX thing. Yeah, this is definitely designed to reduce aero as much as possible. And I thought this would actually do really well. It's I believe it's a hybrid, I don't actually remember exactly, but regardless, it's incredibly slippery, and all-wheel drive, it's still pretty heavy when you put the all-wheel drive conversion on the 10-speed gearbox, because I did do a lot of work to try and make this as heavy as possible, just to give it that little bit of edge going down the mountain, and it did exactly 180 miles an hour. I was expecting a little better, I was expecting more XJ220 speeds, but we are gradually clawing our way up to there. It only clicked over to 180 for just a little bit, but the Speedtail did at least hit the 180 mile an hour barrier. But this is where you really get to see the effect of Forza's weird body kit aerodynamic improving obsession, because this is a Nismo 370Z. Not the greatest car ever made, but still a fine addition to the game, and this has the Nismo body kit on it, which means it actually adds a wing and a splitter. That should make it a lot slower, because of increased drag. But for some reason, in Forza land, it does the opposite, provided it's not actually a Forza Aero. If it says non-adjustable and it's a wing, chances are it actually improves top speed. If you can't remove the wing altogether, putting a wing on it will probably increase the top speed, because Forza's weird, which means this is actually faster than the Speedtail, again by 1 whole mile an hour. And it's all because of that body kit reducing drag and therefore increasing the top speed. It just flipped over for 1/10 of a second, but hey, we didn't say the rules on how far it had to go on to its top speed, how long it had to reach its top speed. It just had to reach it. But of course, some ways are always the best, and we had to throw a Hot Wheels car in here. The Hot Wheels expansion comes out tomorrow, actually, when this video gets released. And it's good to see a Hot Wheels car in here, because this is, well, the twin mill. It's insanely fast, surprisingly aerodynamic looking, and of course, because it's twin-engined, ridiculously heavy, over 5,000 pounds. And everything else, it's sandwiched right in between a bunch of aerodynamic focus cars. This thing gets all of its speed by pure weight. It is heavy, and it's pretty aerodynamic, which means it's actually pretty fast. It was like what I wanted the Chiron to be, because it's half a ton heavier than the Chiron, and it shows. It tied the 370Z without any body modifications. So it got all of its speed through pure brute weight, no aerodynamics at all, at least in Forza's weird world. And it actually hit 181 a lot more convincingly than the Nismo, that is for sure, even if it was only technically tied. But remember how I said, based on the Maserati and the Auto Union and the Toyota and whatnot, that lightweight vehicles don't do very well? Well, those are more like guidelines, because there are exceptions. And the Jaguar D-Type is such an exception. Okay, it wasn't very heavy, even with the V10 engine to add weight, and the all-wheel drive, and the gearbox, and everything. It weighed just south of 2,700 pounds. Which is half the weight of the previous twin mill, and yet it was also Forza's fastest car for like 7 years in a row. And that's because of the aerodynamics. It's very streamlined, it's designed for the Mulsanne straights, and yeah, it was fast. It hit 183 miles an hour. It's still not exceptional. It's still not faster than its newer, younger brother, I guess, the XJ220, but it is fastest car so far, and it is in 4th place. But now you really get to see the benefits of aerodynamics and body kit modifications, because the Le Mans winning D-Type got beaten by an M5 from 1995 because of that weird looking body kit on it. It's like almost a 90s DTM style body kit before they went silhouettes. It's very, very streamlined. The M5 is already pretty damn fast, and this one is even faster. I mean, granted, it's tied with the D-Type, but the fact that a sedan, much less a boxy sedan from the 90s, is just as fast as a D-Type, in my mind makes it faster, just because of the difficulty, I guess, for lack of a better word, of getting up to that speed. It didn't even have the best run, it was bouncing around a little bit, and it still hit an exceptionally high top speed, 183. We're getting up there, it's good, but even the mighty M5, the champion budget car for many years, could not beat that Jaguar, the other Jaguar. Now this car, I learned, was insanely fast because of the 1.6-liter SPEEDRUN challenge, where this dominated with the Turbo Rally engine, and of course this body kit from, I think, Top Secret, or whatever it was. The body kits don't really matter as long as they reduce drag. So provided on a Forza kit, it doesn't matter what parts you swap on. And of course, removing the wing, it makes you just reach silly speeds, even though I don't think that's how that works. But in Forza, simply removing the wing adds like 20 or 30 miles an hour to your top speed. It's ludicrous. And yeah, the R33 GTR was very fast. It was nearly XJ220 fast, 188 miles an hour, so close to 190. I thought this would crack 190, maybe even approach 200, but it just doesn't have the weight. It's decent, but it needs a little more weight, I think, if it really wants to hit that top, although it can really conserve its speed because of that aerodynamics. Which meant, once again, the fastest bloody car of the day was again the XJ220. For some reason, this is just the best vehicle for downhill soapbox racing on the side of a mountain. I don't know why. I tried this with a bunch of other 90s supercars. I even showed a few of them on here. And yet, the XJ220 was just the fastest. Ironically, it wasn't as fast as the last time I did this. Even though I think I'm actually a better driver on this game than I was back then, and I have a better built car because this is all-wheel drive with turbochargers and maximum weight and everything. And yet, it's actually slower than its previous run. I think it was like 194, 195 back 8 months ago. And yeah, now it could only manage 189, so it was the winner of this shootout, but it was actually slower. I don't know why. Forza's weird. And yeah, very, very strange. The thing that helps this car out a lot is its landings. It actually carries the speed more and actually gets its top speed based off of the landings rather than the pure downhill section. So it must be something with the landings really helping it out on that regard. I don't know. But the XJ220 is just the god of this. And yet, we're not quite done yet. Because more than any of the DLC cars on this list from the Car Pass of the Festival playlist, Forza's added one thing since the start of this game, and that was the ability to change the gravity in the event lab. The event lab was already pretty impressive what you could create. Hell, I created this Sky Fortress thing here. But as you can see from this R33, it's very tough on the gravity, shall we say. It's much stronger than it is normally, hence why it's slammed to the ground and has incredible turn-in. Yeah, it has twice the gravity. That's the maximum figure that you could put in. You would double the gravity and that was it. I would have loved to do like 10 times the gravity, but either you can't do it or I'm not skilled enough in the rules menu to do it. Yeah! You can already see this is a very, very quick car. Helped out by a 1,000 horsepower LFA engine for sure, and stock brakes, because stock brakes are lighter, I don't want that, so I learned that the hard way, that 1,000 horsepower and stock brakes are not good, but, you know, at least I have the crazy, gravity helps slow me down immensely. And then, once I built this sky track and just made a near vertical drop down, which turns out very difficult to actually disembark from, because when I tested it, it doesn't have gravity in the testing. You set up the gravity rules after you finish the layout. And apparently, doubling the gravity on that sharp edge makes it very, very difficult to get on, yeah. Either I front flipped or I beached it every time. I only reran the three fastest vehicles, so the M5, the R33, and the XJ220. But I was curious to see, with a perfectly smooth, or as perfect as I can get with the creator, perfectly smooth track that was straight, no debris or anything, and double the gravity, just how fast could you go without using your engine? Like, rules be damned. And you do need to go in first person, because otherwise the camera angle is way too steep and it doesn't record properly at all. And you can see we are freaking flying. That's 300, 320, 330, 334 with a nice barrel roll to finish. Yeah, gravity multipliers are insane in this game. Now this one was pure aerodynamics. There was no shenanigans really with weight. There was no shenanigans with getting the right line or hitting debris or anything. This was just pure aero, and maybe, I guess, tiny bit of weight, but that's very infinitesimal relative to the sheer amount of gravity that we have here. And it was time for the M5 eventually, and you can see the struggle with the camera, so you have to go in first person, and when you see it is flying 200, 220, 240, 250, 270, 280, 300. It's not quite as fast as the R33, but 328 is not bad. And finding those speeds is very difficult because the speedometer is accelerating rapidly right up to there, and then to the ramp, and then it just dies. But 328 is what the M5 got, which means it was all down to the XJ220. I didn't know if this was going to be able to beat the R33. The R33 had far more aero reduction, I should say. This has the wing removed, and it is capable of doing some pretty impressive front flips. But we don't want to do that right now, so instead we're just going to get a little stuck and then try and fail, because, you know, you gotta spend 20 minutes getting this right, because Forza wasn't designed for this. Once you do get it right, it's off to the races. You get no visibility in either way, so I actually had to go to hood camera because the visibility in XJ220 is god-awful with the roll cage. And we're getting our 310, 320, 330, 333 is what I saw. It might be 334, the speedometer was going so fast, but regardless, it's neck and neck with the R33. It's neck and neck. And although the R33 technically claimed victory in the absolute speed record, the XJ220 is still a legitimate winner. 189, technically 194 based on the last video. I think that's the best you can get realistically without going to gravity and custom race modes and everything. So, well done, XJ220, for retaining your lead. I'm not going to do this challenge again unless someone, you know, informs me how to build these cars in a different way that I haven't thought of. I mean, I'm doing everything as logically as I am reasonably thinking of, for lack of a better word. And yeah, there just seems to be no rhyme or reason for which car comes out on top, except for the fact that the XJ220 is damn fast. But anyway, that's going to be it for this episode of Forza Horizon 5, and I'll be back with more.